Hello there.
The notification came on a Tuesday. Not a dramatic Tuesday. Not one of those days where the sky does something cinematic and the light falls through the window in a way that makes everything feel significant. It was just a Tuesday. The kind where you've already made 2 cups of coffee and forgotten to drink both of them. The kind where the ceiling fan hums the same note it always does, and the city outside moves like it has somewhere to be, and you are sitting there, quietly, with no particular feeling about any of it. And then, the thing you'd been waiting for finally arrived. Maybe it was a message. Maybe it was a package at the door. Maybe it was a number in your bank account finally crossing a line you'd drawn in your mind years ago, or a relationship finally becoming official, or a dream finally taking a shape you could hold in your hands. Whatever it was, you had waited for this. You had thought about this on bad days when nothing seemed to be moving. You had whispered it to yourself like a small, private prayer. Once this happens, everything will feel different. Once this arrives, I'll finally feel like myself. And it did arrive. And you looked at it, or opened it, or read it, or stepped into it. And then, nothing. Not disappointment, exactly. Not grief. Just a strange, cotton-wrapped quietness. Like the world had turned down its own volume without asking you. Like you were standing in a room where a party was supposed to be happening, and the streamers were there, and the lights were on, and technically everything was in place. But the feeling never showed up to its own celebration. If you know that silence, this is for you. There's actually a name for what you felt in that moment. Psychologists sometimes call it arrival fallacy, this quiet, almost embarrassing realization that reaching the destination didn't deliver the feeling you'd pre-ordered. But honestly, giving it a clinical name doesn't make it feel less strange. If anything, it makes it feel lonelier. Like, great, it's a known phenomenon, and I still don't know what to do with it. So let's not talk about it like a diagnosis. Let's talk about it like what it actually is, a very human miscalculation about the nature of happiness. Here's the thing about wanting something deeply. The moment you want it, really want it, your mind doesn't just store the desire. It starts building. Quietly, without asking your permission, it begins constructing a whole version of your future self. The one who finally has the thing. The one who walks differently, breathes easier, laughs more freely. Your mind furnishes that future like an apartment. Puts in the warm lighting, arranges the furniture just so, makes it feel lived in, even before you arrive. And so by the time the thing actually comes, you've already lived a version of receiving it, hundreds of times over, in the background of your ordinary days. The anticipation was never just waiting. It was experiencing. Quietly, repeatedly, without you even noticing. So when the real moment finally lands, the flesh and blood version of it, the Tuesday version, your nervous system has almost no new information to process. It already knows this room. It helped build this room. And that's why it feels hollow. Not because the thing wasn't worth wanting. Not because you were wrong to hope. But because hope, when it's held long enough, has a way of spending the happiness in advance. Like buying a meal and eating it in your imagination so many times that by the time the food arrives, you're somehow not that hungry anymore. And here's what I want you to sit with, gently. That doesn't mean you did anything wrong. It doesn't mean your joy is broken or that you're incapable of feeling satisfied. It just means you're someone who cared. Deeply enough to dream it forward. Deeply enough to let it matter before it was real. That's not a flaw. That's just what it looks like when a person genuinely hopes for something. I remember the exact moment I got my first piece of writing published online. It was a small platform, nothing grand, nothing that would make anyone's jaw drop. But for me, at that point in my life, it was everything. I had been writing quietly for years. Notebooks filled with half-finished thoughts. Google Docs opened at 2 in the morning, typed into and then closed without saving. Words that felt important to me but lived in a kind of permanent shadow, unseen, unheard, existing only in the space between my chest and my screen. I had wanted this, someone, anyone, reading something I wrote, for so long that it had become part of the background hum of my daily life. The wanting sat next to me at breakfast. It followed me on evening walks. On the hard days, I would tell myself, just wait. Once someone reads your words and it means something to them, that will be enough. That will be the proof that you were never wasting your time. And then one afternoon, I got the email. Your piece has been accepted and published. I was sitting at my desk. The window was open. I could hear a neighbor's radio playing something faintly through the wall, a song I didn't recognize, in a language I didn't speak. The afternoon light was doing that particular thing it does in late summer, where everything looks slightly golden and slightly tired at the same time. I read the email 3 times, and then I sat very still. I kept waiting for something to arrive inside my chest, some warmth, some rush, some physical confirmation that yes, this is the moment, you can feel it now. I even pressed my hand to my sternum, almost unconsciously, like I was checking for a heartbeat I was suddenly unsure about. But the room just stayed the same room. The neighbor's radio kept playing. The golden light didn't change its mind. I remember closing the laptop slowly, walking to the kitchen, and making tea I didn't particularly want. Standing there while the kettle boiled, staring at nothing, feeling the strange weight of a dream that had technically come true but somehow hadn't made a sound when it landed. I wasn't sad. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't ungrateful. I just felt thin, somehow, like a piece of paper held up to the light. Present, but see-through. There, but barely casting a shadow. I didn't tell anyone that night. Not because the news wasn't worth sharing, but because I didn't know how to explain that the thing I'd wanted had finally come. And I had felt absolutely nothing. It took me a while to understand what that emptiness was actually trying to say, because for a long time, I interpreted it as evidence of something wrong with me. Like my emotional wiring had a loose connection somewhere. Like everyone else was out there fully feeling their wins, crying happy tears, calling their mothers, jumping on beds, and I was just standing in my kitchen, watching a kettle, vaguely confused about my own life. But I've come to think that the emptiness wasn't an absence of joy. It was more like a pause. A breath between one version of yourself and the next. The moment after a door closes and before your eyes adjust to the new room. See, we spend so much time in the wanting that we forget to build a self that exists beyond the wanting. The goal becomes load-bearing. We hang so much of our identity on it, so much of our sense of forward motion, that when it finally arrives and becomes ordinary, becomes Tuesday, we feel strangely unmoored. Not because we failed, but because we never quite imagined what came after. And I think that's worth sitting with, gently and without judgment. Not every arrival is supposed to feel like fireworks. Some of the most important moments of your life will come quietly, the way dawn comes, not all at once, but slowly, without announcing itself, until you simply look up one day and realize it's light outside. The published piece didn't change my life in a single afternoon. But months later, a stranger messaged me saying that something I wrote had helped them feel less alone on a hard night. And that small, delayed, unscheduled thing, landed somewhere real inside me. Warm and unhurried and completely unplanned. Joy, I've learned, rarely arrives on the timeline we build for it. It tends to come sideways. Through the small door you left open without realizing. In the quiet Tuesday moments you weren't performing happiness for, just living, just breathing, just being someone who kept going even when the feeling didn't show up on cue. Maybe the emptiness after arrival isn't the end of the story. Maybe it's just the part where the story gets honest, where it stops being about getting the thing, and starts being about learning who you are, now that you have it. So if you're sitting somewhere right now, maybe on the edge of your bed, maybe with a cup of something warm going cold beside you, and you're quietly carrying the weight of a dream that arrived and didn't feel the way you thought it would. I hope this helped you feel a little less alone in that. Because the truth is, you're not broken. You're not ungrateful. You're not someone who doesn't deserve good things, or someone who will never feel satisfied. You're just someone who cared enough to want something deeply, and deep wanting leaves deep marks, even after the wanting is over. The feeling will come. Maybe not today. Maybe not in the form you expected. But somewhere in the ordinary days ahead, in a laugh you didn't plan for, in a quiet moment that asks nothing from you, something will settle softly in your chest. And you'll recognize it, not as the explosion you rehearsed, but as something quieter and truer. Something that feels less like arriving, and more like belonging. You don't have to perform your happiness. You don't have to match the feeling to the occasion. You're allowed to receive good things slowly. You're allowed to need time to catch up to your own life. And maybe that's enough, for now. To simply be here. In this ordinary Tuesday. Holding something real, even if it's still learning how to feel like yours. After everything you've chased and waited for and whispered to yourself on hard nights. What if the life you were building was already beautiful, even before you knew you'd arrived?
Thank you for listening, and see you in the next story.